Today, we're going to cover unlocking the power of persuasion in your DMs using the 6 human meta biases. Today, we're going to cover unlocking the power of persuasion in your DMs using the 6 human meta biases. Most people are like, Sean, what the heck is a bias, or let alone a meta bias? And the answer is a bias is what the mass majority have a tendency to do. Right? And so today's outcome is very, very simple. You are the chef, okay? And we're going to walk through creating a perfect dish. The ingredients that we're going to use are only 6 meta biases. I'm going to show you how to put them in the right order so that every time you're doing this little cooking deal and you're making your perfect dish, it ends up when you put all the right ingredients, the 6 meta biases in, it creates a sale, okay? So if you're with me, write yes in the chat or be excited to raise your hand. That's cool. Here we go into what are the 6 meta biases. Now, humans on Earth have around 200 biases. Okay, so there's about 200 total biases, but there's only 6 that if you focus on these 6, you're going to change everything. You can see what they are here. There's a specific order that triggers the primal brain with the biases. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to show you the order, and then we're going to go through each one, and then I'm going to show you the formula. So the first one is the visual bias. The second one, and this is the right order from start to finish of the 6. So it goes visual bias, personal bias, tangible bias, memorable bias, contrasting bias, and then the last one is emotional. And when you order these in your messaging, you create persuasion. Okay, so this is the secret of how to create a lot of persuasion in messages. Let's go through each one of them. First, visual bias. What is the visual bias? Quickly defined is the power of imagery and visualization in persuasion through your words, right? The how-to. What we want to do when we're writing DMs is we want to use vivid imagery or emotive visuals like infographics to explain your products, benefits, words that create visual pictures in people's minds, and so on and so forth. An example in the chat. Now, what I did here is for DMs, I wrote all of these in a question-based form. You can use a visual bias anywhere, anyhow. Here's an example. Imagine writing something like this. Now, maybe you don't sell software and that's the case, that's fine. It's like, can you picture your team achieving twice as much in half the time with our blank? And you would just put whatever your special sauce is. Instead of the word software, you would just put blank, right? So in Harley's life, it would be, can you picture your team achieving twice as much in half the time? Maybe you say with our software or with our roofing system is another way to just say that. Raj, I think you could use something like with our coaching support or system or something like that. You could just change that word software into something else. This starts using meta biases with your prospects. Very simple to do, right? So that's the first question. Hey, could you ever picture your team achieving twice as much if you were to use something? Obviously, this question is not going to be the first message you send somebody. You have to have a little bit of conversation before that, but you can drop these in as kind of a rapport nurture building act. After visual, we get to personal. Personal, what is the personal bias? How do we put it in DMs? Well, first of all, it's defined. It's the bias towards information that feels personally relevant. Something that puts you in the driver's seat when it's focused on you, right? That's why that word you is so powerful in the English language. How do we do it? We tailor our messages to address specific needs or pain points of the prospect. We all know in our sales conversation, the most important part of the conversation is development of their pain, problem, or thing they're struggling with. And that leads to kind of what Nick talked about a little bit earlier, is when you can define or listen to or give clarity on the exact problem or thing that your prospect is struggling with, their primal brain engages and immediately says, hey, you know my problem better than I can describe it. That means you must have the answer to it as well. That's an automatic assumption that happens deep in your primal brain, and it causes reaction of people giving you a credit card. Here's an example. Hey, does this describe the exact custom process that you want? Right, so we're in the conversation and you said, well, what if you did this, this, and this? Or have you tried this and this and this? Oh, you're trying to achieve this. Oh, I see. Like, what if we did this? Would this describe the exact custom process that you would want? And that last piece, the process that you want is the part that makes it extremely personal. And then they say, Yeah, that's exactly what I need. And now we've created customization in a very generic messaging format, which is powerful, right? So first visual, then personal. Now we move into tangible. This is, can you touch it? That's what tangible means. Defined as the preference for concrete, real world application, something that somebody can actually reach out and touch. Okay. How to do it? You provide clear, tangible outcomes using your product. Very simply, example, hey, would a 30% increase in sales in the next 90 days work for you? That's somebody can now take that 30% increase in 90 days. They have a time period. They know the results. And what tangibility is a specific outcome that they can get only using your service, product, or whatever that you're in that conversation speaking with. So adding in a tangible piece of a DM is really, really valuable, right? Because if you can come in and you can say, hey, look, like, this book as an example, this book is from Jason Flatley, and he's one of the best webinar people of all times. Like, he's done hundreds of millions of dollars in webinars, and he says, if you implement just this one page of this one chapter and you put this one slide in, you could get a 10% return on the webinars that you're currently doing. Is that interesting to you? That's something that somebody could say, oh my God, if I can get 10% more in my webinar because of that. Yes, that's interesting. That's tangible. Now I've activated the tangibility bias, and that's going to lead somebody towards booking a call or buying from you. After tangibility, we get into memorable, right? We need to say something that keeps it really memorable. One of the best people on earth that I've ever seen is Chris. Chris does such a wonderful job when it comes to being memorable because he has this quirky humor and he loves to throw in just like spin kicks that make people go, huh, that's awesome. I'm never going to forget that, and we get into it. So it's defined by making your message stick in the prospect's memory. That's the definition of the memorable bias. How to do it is we just use catchy phrases, mnemonics, or striking facts. Striking facts are really powerful because here's an example of this. Hey, Chris, did you know that 60% of engagement happens at your fourth touch point in the DMs? Why is that memorable? Because there's numbers that are specific. And if you don't know when and how the engagement happens, this is something that will stick in your brain, right? You can also use, grotesque or sometimes other examples that are a little bit more memorable. Okay, so that's the memorable bias. Let's move on. The next one is contrasting. So contrasting is fat or skinny, tall or short, right? Defined by highlighting differences to clarify choices. How to do it? We compare your product with the status quo, what your competitors and everyone else is doing, and why you are completely different. This is the contrasting bias. Here's an example. Hey, would you rather ride a tricycle, like using spreadsheets to manage everything, or do you just want to jump in the driver's seat of a Lamborghini with like FlowChat, right? It's using spreadsheets or doing the exact opposite, systemizing and moving in a good direction. So again, when you add the contrasting bias into your messaging, you will create more persuasion, which will again lead them to the end result. And then lastly, the sixth one is the emotional bias, defined by connecting through feelings, not just facts. If you're an empath or you exhibit, like, you can feel other people's feelings, this one should come pretty easy to you. The how-to is to stir emotions by discussing the joy of success or the frustration of the problem your product solves. Again, there's there's five, but there's four main reasons why somebody would move the needle in their business. The most powerful one is pain in the present. Within the last 30 to 90 days, if something's happened that caused them a pain and they can't move forward in their business, and you have that solution, that's going to create a buyer faster than any other method or emotion that it comes into. Second one is pain in the future. Hey, the winter's coming. You need to do something now. That will get people to move the needle. And then the other two are pleasure-based. This is the joy part. So pleasure in the present. Hey, I want to eat some sweets because it's cold outside. I'm going to go buy some chocolate right now. Or the pain or the pleasure in the future would be like, hey, the summer's coming. I'm going to enjoy some sunshine. I'm going to go buy a boat. Those are the four reasons why most people would move the needle to buy anything. Here's the example. Hey, would you sleep better or have peace of mind if you knew our business could produce your next client on demand? I'm tying into this emotional part of peace of mind, right? Would you sleep better? That's something that somebody could do. You guys could take that exact thing, and I could give example after example for each of you, but using some sort of a question like this in your DM messaging game will start to draw out the emotional bias, and it will create this pathway of how you can win. So now you've seen kind of all 6 of these meta biases. They're really valuable. Let's talk about using them in persuasion, right? Some really smart people from SalesBrain created this matrix. We said, what does it even look like and how is it? Well, first of all, we got to understand that primal engagement, primal brain engagement. So you have 2 types of brains. You got the primal brain and you got the rational brain. The primal brain is that one that's inherent, that it's all the systems and stuff you learned from 0 to about 7 years old that's stuck in your brain, right? And it goes from basically neutral to aroused, or confused to persuaded. So you can either be neutral or negative, or you can be completely aroused about something, or you can be confused on the business side about something, or you can be completely persuaded. That's the primal engagement kind of matrix. And then moving left to right or right to left, you have the rational brain. So that means you can either be neutral, or you can become confused, or you can be aroused, or you can become persuaded, depending on the level. So this is how it works. This is the order that gets somebody 100% persuaded. And then guess what? I'm going to give you a scorecard for you guys on everything that you're doing. So first of all, we always start visual. It's like 82% of our population is visually engaged. So if we start with saying that visual type question first, we're going to get in the right order. Then we go into personal, and then memorable, tangible, contrasting, and eventually emotional. And when you put your questioning in this order from visual all the way to emotional, what you do is you take somebody, because we always want to start from a negative neutral position in any conversation we ever take. We want to start negative neutral because we don't have to assume anything, and we can just start asking good questions. And as we start asking the questions, the development happens, and that person gets back into their own world. This is where the difference between traditional sales and professional sales happens, because in traditional sales, people say, hey, I can do this, this, and this. My stuff is amazing. Versus, man, I don't even know if we should be talking. Like, do you even have a struggle with this one thing? Right? It's the same type of an entry. They're 2 different entry paths talking about the same thing. But what happens is more people are going to be like, oh, this guy's a little bit unsure and uncertain. We did that on purpose, right? Because we have the fangs back in our mouth. We're not pulling them out yet, because we need to identify whether or not they're a great fit. And if you walk through these questions in this order, you will persuade more people than you wouldn't, right? And so here's the guidelines. Don't panic. It's okay if you don't use all of them, right? There's a scorecard I'm going to show you on the next slide, which will help you tremendously. Secondly, you just apply the filter after you're finished instead of during. So one of the things that we do with my setter team, with my sales force, is I will look at anything that they want to know about whether or not we're using biases in persuasion, and we'll go through, hey, did this hit this bias, this bias, this bias, yes or no, right? That's pretty easy to do after the fact. So as you start doing that kind of work after any conversations, and then you come back, you say, oh yeah, I remember that, I'm going to try it this time, right? And then lastly, repetition is the mother of all learning. So the more you do it, the better you get. That's really it. So here's the scorecard. I think this is valuable. Take a screenshot of this, because this is how you can persuade people, right? If you don't use any of the meta biases, now you're probably already using 1 or 2 or maybe 3 of these things on your own without even thinking about it. But if you don't use any in a messaging conversation, they're not going to be persuaded, and they won't say yes. If you're using 1, typically it means you need more conversation. You need to do more clarity, work finding, you need to do pain solving, et cetera, et cetera. If you start using 2 of them, you could get 40% of the people to say yes. And it goes on. 3 of them, 50%. 4 of them, now you're into the game. 75%. Imagine 75 out of 100 people saying yes to you simply because you just changed the way that you're asking some of the words that you're saying. If you use all 5 of them, 90%. And if you get 6 of them in there, guess what? Shut up and take my money. That's what's up. With that said, this is how the meta biases work. Hopefully you took a picture. Happy to answer any questions about that. Let's go FlowChat.